Welcome back to another episode of the Divine Ascent podcast. My name is Vivek Matthew, and today I'm here with Reverend Father Joshua Varughese. He's the Assistant Vicar at the St. Gregorios Orthodox Church in Austin, and is the youth minister here at the St. Gregorios Orthodox Church here in Houston. And Achen, before we begin, can you start us off with prayer?
Yes, let's pray. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts and sins, as we also have forgiven our debtors. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
So before we begin this episode, we always like to start off with a little icebreaker.
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you get into the ministry?
Yeah, so I am, born and raised here in Houston, Texas. Um, my background is nursing, so I was a registered nurse for some time. Um, this could be a lot longer, so I'm going to keep it short. But I kind of got an interest for church when I was about 19. Before that, I was serving the altar. I was coming to church, but it was just kind of, I was doing it because I was told to, or it was checking off boxes. So I didn't really know what I was doing, why I was doing it, how it all connected. So when I became 19, I started to get a little bit more of a interest in that, and I luckily had a priest, a younger priest, come at that time to the church, and so I just asked him all my questions, and he explained everything to me, and over time it started to make sense. I did some more reading, things like that. But ministry was never really a option. I never really had that plan, right? I never really, I don't want to say cared for it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. I just wanted to learn. And so when I was around that time, 1920, I had that thought of, hey, what if you went to seminary? And I quickly shot it down. I was still in undergrad, still working on my nursing degree. So I quickly shut it down. And I don't know about you guys, but growing up, that was, people talk about that, right? Amongst their guy friends, that comes up. So I just thought it was someone, it's just, hey, you're with people, you're thinking that way, it'll go away. It's a phase. Um, it didn't go away. It didn't go away. Um, I fought it till I was about 27, and then that's when I started to focus and take it seriously. And then I went to seminary. But even then, going to seminary, I didn't again look or want ordination. I just wanted to serve. I used to tell myself, I don't know if I read this somewhere, I can't remember. But when I was younger, I used to tell myself, um, whether it's cleaning the church or serving the liturgy. I just want to help. I just want to serve. That's it. I was hoping it was going to be cleaning the church, but God, I guess God didn't want it to be that way. If I had known, I probably would have said something different. But I just wanted to serve, and so I accepted the calls to ordination with fear, with anxiety, with stress. But I appreciate it now, right? I I'm still new to it, right? I've only been ordained for a year as a priest, so still new. But so far, my experience has taught me to trust in God more.
Was there any key defining moments where you're like, oh, maybe that pushed you to seminary?
No, I was waiting for one too. I was waiting for my road to Damascus,
uh-huh.
like for St. Paul, for the light to shine
Yeah.
down and God to be like, I want you to go to seminary. That never happened.
All right, then let me ask you this. After you started serving, like, what was a kind of a moment that kind of made you think, yeah, this is where I want to be, serving in the church,
In any capacity?
in any capacity?
I wouldn't say there's one collective moment because I always see myself as, or I always think there's somewhere to improve.
Mhm.
So I don't, and maybe this is something deeper, but I don't want to go into it. But I don't ever see, like, I don't think there's one specific moment, but um, I think over the collective, right?
Mm.
Everyone asks me why I went to seminary or why I became ordained. I don't have an answer for why. I've heard people say, I wanted to serve the church, I wanted to help the church, I wanted to, um, things like that, and that is partially true. But what I'm learning in my young ministry, what I'm learning is maybe God sent me because I needed the church more than the church needed me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whether I was to be a priest or not, the church would have survived. But I don't think I, as an individual, as a Christian, would have survived if I left the church. Because, and I was trying to keep it short, but the reason I say that is because in that journey to seminary, I had some period where I was like, I don't want to come to church anymore because this thought was just always there. And it was causing me stress.
Mm-hmm.
The thought to go to seminary. It was causing me stress and anxiety. So I don't want this anymore. So let me, like, if I disconnect from the church, then maybe it'll go away. It didn't go away. But I'm slowly thinking maybe if I hadn't gone this route, I would have gone into a place where I would have been lost.
In this episode today, we're going to be talking about the role of suffering and what the church view on suffering is. So, to start it all off, what is suffering?
So to give a Google definition, right? Suffering is undergoing pain, stress, hardship. To put a little bit more of a Christian aspect on it, suffering is brokenness in this fallen world, right? Brokenness in this fallen world. It's not a part of God's original plan or God's creation, but rather it's a consequence of of separation from God. So it entered the world through the fall.
So, then, so suffering and pain entered through the fall. Oh, hold on, let me ask you this. Why would God allow suffering and pain to enter at all? Wouldn't it just be only death, no suffering?
Yeah. So it wasn't just um, death and suffering and pain. Like it was everything we see now
Mm-hmm.
in the sense of our fallenness, right? It was, of course, suffering, of course, pain, of course, death, but it was the way we live, our hunger, our fatigue, our all the passions, pride, anger, jealousy, all those things entered because of our fall, because of our separation from God.
So then, so when we talk about suffering, it's a very broad term.
Yeah, very much.
So then, can we kind of make like what are the different types of sufferings? Can we like kind of define these into categories then?
Yeah, this is a general. I'm sure someone could go deeper. There's physical suffering, right? Illness, disease, um, maybe a defect, right? Um, there's mental or emotional anxiety, stress, PTSD, things like that. There is like consequences of sin, right? So like if you, whether it's personal or communal, you make a decision, suffering enters through your decision. And then there's, which I think we don't focus on enough as Christians, is spiritual, right? Spiritual suffering. Whether that's spiritual abuse, whether that's personal relationship with God, where we ourselves don't understand things or don't process things, and we blame God and we separate ourselves from God, and we just have this horrible relationship, right? So we don't pray, we don't read the Bible, we don't do any of this, but we want God to kind of answer what we ask of Him. So I think spiritual sickness. I think that's why I'll group it.
So spiritual sickness, and what was the one before that one?
Sin, like consequences of our decisions.
Okay, so can we talk a little bit more about what is the difference between spiritual suffering and suffering from sin?
I think there's a lot of similarities, but in consequences of sin, right? To use an example, if we make a bad decision and that affects someone, right, then their family is going to suffer, right? So to use the example of someone who drunk driving, right? Someone made a decision to get drunk and drive, right? Not exactly the best decision, right?
Yeah.
Their choice got them into an accident. That accident resulted in the loss of someone else's life. Now, people around that person who knew that person, who loved that person, are suffering. Right? So that's a consequence of that drunk driver's decision, of that sin that he or she did, right? And that's a personal. And the way you see it affect the community, right? The loved one's family and friends and wherever they are, that's you could even say like a community, suffering in the community sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think what we don't maybe talk about enough is how sin affects not just us, but the community. How we ourselves bring sin and suffering into the world with our decisions.
So I do want to go a little bit more into that,
Hmm.
right? Because I think most of us, when we live our not like in our lives, we think that when we sin, it's the only people we're affecting is ourselves and
Hmm.
our relationship with God.
Hmm.
So how is sin more of a communal thing?
Every time we make a decision to sin, right, we probably only see the way it affects us, but it actually brings a disorder into the community. So
Mm-hmm.
if you think about the early church in terms of confession, right, the early church's confession was public. People would publicly confess because it was a smaller community. It wasn't the church that we know now. Much smaller. Most of them, I guess, were like family and friends. So a much smaller group,
Mm-hmm.
right? So when they confessed publicly, not only were they acknowledging their sins, but they were acknowledging how they were affecting each other,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then they forgive, and that community is restored.
But I do want to go into that because that is interesting.
Yeah.
Do you know if like the person who was confessing, did they stand like in the middle of the
Oh,
church?
I'm not sure about the
Oh,
details.
you don't know the
Yeah,
details?
I never actually asked.
But
I always imagined like a podiogum, but like a nice one, like a
like
healthy
a
one,
church body
like
meeting?
sorry, like a church body meeting, like a healthy one, where everyone's kind of just sitting there and they stand up like, "Hey, I'm sorry for this, this, and this," right? Which is crazy because you think of a general body, you probably
Oh my goodness.
you couldn't imagine that.
So then what is spiritual suffering? Because I know you brought that up earlier.
Mhm.
Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Yeah, yeah. So spiritual suffering, if we to give a broader view, right? If
Mhm.
we go back to the fall, right? We go back to Genesis 3, and we see Adam and Eve fall, and that fall isn't simply a you guys are being punished for what you did, right? That fall is a separation from God. It's inheriting something we weren't ready to inherit, right? So we inherit this fall. We separate ourselves from God. That sin, that separation disrupts our communion from God, and now we
Mhm.
see everything that we see now, right? So when we talk about spiritual suffering, we're talking about sin, which is missing the mark, which is separation from God. We're talking about the passions. We're talking about temptation. We're talking about doubt. We're talking about even persecution, right, to some degree. We're talking about all these things or all these different actions or thoughts or uh, words that are keeping us from a communal relationship with God, the way it was intended to be,
Mhm.
right, in Genesis. So spiritual suffering is even, I would say, if you want to get really into the detail or into it, I would say even how we take Kurbana, right?
Mhm.
That preparation, uh, like, are we properly preparing ourselves for what that is, for
Mhm.
the body and blood of Christ, right? Which I know a lot of people they don't believe or they don't agree, right? Um, our church says, right, even if you're an Orthodox Christian, right, you got to be baptized, you got to pray,
Go to
go to
confession.
confession, pray,
Mhm.
come to church on time, be a part of not evening prayer the night before, morning prayer the morning of, right?
Mhm.
You have to prepare yourself, and when we don't prepare ourselves for that body and blood, for all of that, what that is to actually mean and do for us, that's a form of sickness, right?
Mhm.
We just kind of take it as it's just something else to do,
Mhm.
right? So spiritual suffering could be so many things.
Mhm. You brought up an example, and I wanted to touch base on it.
Hmm.
Is persecution really spiritual suffering? Because I was thinking in the terms of where it's like persecution and it was kind of related to more to martyrdom,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
Because like while we do know people in like not in the U.S., luckily not in the U.S. maybe, but people have died
Yeah.
for the faith.
Yeah.
Is that really a case of spiritual suffering, or would that be something more to rejoice on?
Yeah, yeah. So I guess the distinction between like so martyrdom is one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Persecution could be not necessarily just martyrdom, right? It could
Mm-hmm.
be like in war or anything that people are
Oh, okay.
right. Not necessarily like in a martyr definition,
Mm-hmm.
but persecution just could be what people are experiencing
Mm-hmm.
in any sense, right? Maybe not because I know when you use the word we think like war and we
Yeah.
think so maybe more to that,
Mm-hmm.
right? But uh, doesn't always mean they're Christian or martyrs,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, meaning doesn't always mean that they are necessarily Christians being persecuted. They're just people.
Yeah.
So
That makes
it's
sense.
it's entered the world through that fall, right? Things like this.
So then, now that we kind of talked about suffering from sin and spiritual suffering,
Mhm.
is suffering seen more as a punishment or a test of faith? Because some of the examples I would immediately go to are the story of Job,
Yeah.
where he was a righteous man and God allowed him to suffer.
Hmm.
There's also, we see Sodom and Gomorrah, and we also even see the Israelites not trusting in God,
Yeah.
and then another 40 years in the wilderness.
Yeah.
So, just to reiterate the question, is suffering more seen as a punishment or test of faith?
All the above.
All of it?
I
Both?
would say both. I would say both and more, right? We see suffering as being corrective with the Israelites. We see suffering as being a test of faith with Job. We see suffering as being a punishment with Sodom and Gomorrah. And then we just in Scripture we just see suffering, right? So what's interesting with this is suffering is suffering,
Mm-hmm.
right? You could be good or bad. You could be male or female. You could be
Does it discriminate?
doesn't discriminate, right? Young or old, Christian or non-Christian, right? We all experience suffering to some degree. So to ask, is it a punishment? Is it a test of faith? Is it sin? Is it just living faithfully and being tested? Like grouping it up into those things, I think it just kind of makes it a little bit more difficult to navigate, right? So suffering is there, right? The question or what we should be trying to figure out is not really why it's there, right? But how can we get through it, right? Because it's there for a reason, right? In the book of Job, yeah, suffering is a test of faith, right? But we have to remember in the early chapters of Job, the reason why God allowed this to happen, it wasn't because he was bored and the devil was like, hey, I'm gonna test this guy, let's see what happens, right? The devil said the only reason why Job follows you is because you've blessed him. Like you put a hedge around, is what he says. You've blessed him, you've given him all these things. So that's the only reason why he follows you. That's the only reason why he believes in you. And so God was like, okay, test it, like see what it's about, right? So we see that, and luckily Job, he has a long conversation with his friends, and eventually he talks to God, and God explains things. And once God is done explaining, Job doesn't like the whole book, right?
Yeah.
I was reading it. Right? The whole book is Job and his friends conversing, and he has so much to say. They all do. And after God talks for like a chapter or two, Job, like his response is like five, like really short, right? I forget how many verses, but it's like really short. So it's really interesting. But once God put things in perspective, he was like, I have nothing else to say, right? And he accepted it. But that was his suffering. What came out of that suffering was better for Job, not only as an individual, but he got everything back, right? We see that with Sodom and Gomorrah. That was a refusal of repentance. God gave them the opportunity to repent. He gave them warnings, and they didn't change. They wouldn't change. They didn't care to listen, right? So in that suffering was punishment, right? Which God is a just judge, right? It's within his
Like power and
power and
right?
being to correct, to punish, right? Because I think we paint God as this. Someone has said it to me a long time ago. This bubbly figure. I think it's more of a Western influence, but no, God is a just judge. He'll correct when need, and he'll say it as needed. We see that in the Scripture with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, with Christ, the way he talks to them, the way he corrects them. I don't know if we really catch the context or the tone, because it's hard to read the Bible and get the context, or read it even like a text message or an email and get the context, right?
Yeah.
Oh, why is that period there? Are they mad at me? Right?
The exclamation point,
Exclamation
yes.
point, yeah, right? I don't know if you've sent like work emails and like, yes, no problem. Like, wait, what? Yes, no problem. Like with periods, and it's like, wait, how does that sound? So it's sometimes it's kind of hard to catch the context Christ is speaking with, but he's a corrective God. And in the Israelites in the wilderness, right? Looking back from my perspective now, it's easy to, I guess, kind of say this, but like they literally saw Moses work miracles.
Yeah.
They saw the Red Sea, right? They saw so many things.
The rock that's proud of water.
Yeah, right. And they still, they still didn't trust God. And I know, like maybe I don't know. If I saw at least one or two of those miracles, I'd be like, okay, something's here.
Something's here.
Something is here, right? And God was, was among them, right? So like, to for them to see all these things and to still not have faith, to still not trust God, God had to correct that. God had to, show them like this is like truly trust on me, lean on me.
Mm-hmm.
This is this everything will be okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's just kind of funny to me.
I was thinking of the whenever Moses went up to the mount, got the tablets, and came back down, and he just sees a golden statue and all the Israelites
Yeah,
just worshiping
yeah,
him. And he's like, wow, I was gone for like
yeah.
a day.
I was, yeah, I was gone. Like what happened?
So then, in certain situations, why we see some people suffer more than others. Some of us are blessed to be in a full family home, and some of us are having more suffering than
Yeah.
our friends. Or even when we look into like foreign countries, we see more suffering there. So then, why would God allow other people to suffer more?
Yeah. Why does some suffer more than others?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, man, I couldn't tell you why. I couldn't tell what God is doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why I think right now the way we view suffering, I think we need to reframe it a little bit. We get caught up on the why,
Mm-hmm.
right? Why me? Why now? Why this? Which is valid. Like I understand 100%. I've asked that question a bunch of times. Um, but ultimately, we have to accept and we have to know the world is broken, right? The world is broken. We all are engaging in this world in sinful ways, right? Even the most devout monks and saints, people that we declare saints, they suffer, right? They get sick, they get cancer, right? So the world is broken. It's just the way this world is, and God is working in ways that we can't imagine. He's working in ways that we can't understand. And we see that in the book of Job. He literally says that to Job.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot longer, but
Yeah.
he says, like, there's so many things going on pretty much that we can't even imagine. We can't even understand, right? So God is working in ways that we cannot see. The other aspect of this, again, is free will. God has given us the free will to make some decisions, right?
Mm-hmm.
To make choices, right? The example we used earlier about a drunk driver, a little bit more deliberate in your choice, right?
Yeah.
But there's people that get cancer. Why? I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't tell you, right? There's people that are struggling to have children. Why? Couldn't tell you, right? There's people that are struggling to get jobs or rekindle their relationship with their family, right? Why? Like we couldn't tell you, but the focus is, from in my humble opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
The focus isn't why, right? The focus is, okay, this is the situation, right? God, help me through it. Like, how do I get through this,
Mm-hmm.
right? The other thing is we're all carrying a cross. There's that story, famous story, well-known story. I was told it a long time ago. I don't know all the details, but there was a man who was tired of the cross he was carrying,
Mm-hmm.
and so he goes to God and he says, Lord, I'm tired of this cross. I'm paraphrasing, so I don't know it word for word, but I'm tired of carrying this cross. Can you give me a different cross to carry? So God, the Lord takes him into a room full of crosses. There's big ones, there's small ones, there's, I don't know, wide, narrow, so many different shapes.
Yeah.
He sees the smallest one, he picks it up and he goes, Lord, I want this one. And God says, that was already your cross, right? That's the one I already gave you, right?
Mm-hmm.
So God, why these sufferings happen, why people suffer more than others, I couldn't tell you, right? That's God's discernment. But how we endure it, how we carry it,
Mm-hmm.
what we get out of it, right? How we bear that cross, that's what matters, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to trust at some point, one, it's a mystery, but also it's ultimately for our salvation,
Yeah.
right? Like the Israelites, right? Corrective, right? For their salvation, they needed to trust in God more.
Mm-hmm.
Corrective. For Sodom and Gomorrah, I know this might be hard to understand, but stopping that sin, going
Yeah.
from any further.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where would that city have gone? Those cities have gone, or who else would they have affected if they were allowed to continue in that way,
Mm-hmm.
right? Now, I'm not saying like, hey, because people are bad, it's okay
Yeah.
to destroy them, right? But that's God knows.
Yeah.
We don't. So why? If we get caught up in that question, the logic and everything, we could go over it again and again, but
Mm-hmm.
we're never going to get the answer we seek. Chances are God is not going to come down and say, like Job, he did to Job, not going to come down to us and say, why? This is why, right? Um, so if it's there, we know it's there, we're going through it, how can we get through it?
Mm-hmm.
With Christ.
I know you were saying don't emphasize on the why
Yeah.
a lot, but a question comes into me is like we call our God a loving God. We say God is love.
Mm.
And I feel like that's so common if you read the Bibles and any of the prayers. We kind of emphasize God is love. So why would a loving God allow suffering?
A few points. One, what is love?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Again, I think we've painted love into this. I'll accept you for who you are. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a part of it.
Yeah.
But love is also corrective. If you tell a child not to put their hand on a stove, and they do, and you pull their hand away, right? They're gonna be mad at you, right?
Mm-hmm.
But why did you do that? So they wouldn't burn their hand, right?
Yeah.
Love is corrective. That means love is saying no, right? Or putting people, um, telling people things they can't hear, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just lovey-dovey. You're in a field of flowers or something, right?
Yeah.
It's constructive as well.
Mm-hmm.
The other aspect of this, and I was reading this. Um, in Job, in the old Orthodox Study Bible. Um, they list, why does God allow the enemy to live? And they list two reasons. One is that he might disgrace himself the more in being conquered by the weaker, by us, right? So that the devil might disgrace himself the more in being conquered by the weaker, by us. The second thing they said was that mankind might be crowned with a victory in overcoming him, right? So why do all these things happen? Well, earlier we said, corrective, punishment, test, mystery. Now in the Bible, in the commentary, it's saying that we can overcome the devil, right? Those are all general, right? We don't have specifics. Romans 5, chapter 5, verses 3. And not only that, but we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance, perseverance, character, and character, hope, right? So from suffering, we're seeing it's corrective, it's a punishment. It can also be overcoming the devil, showing the devil that he has no power over us. It can also be producing perseverance, character, hope, right? And I list all that to say, if suffering brings all of those things, why would we ask God to stop it? Why would we want God to stop it?
Mm-hmm.
But of course, that's on us to go about the suffering the right way.
Yeah.
If we suffer so much and we say we're at our limit, I don't trust God anymore, then that's our part of trying to work out, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if suffering brings all of these things,
Yeah.
then why would we want it gone, right? Because think about on the flip side, think about all the good suffering has brought, right? Think about the good things suffering has done. Salvation, martyrs. Going back to our conversation on martyrs, the martyrs they offered themselves, right, and they received that eternal crown, right,
Mm-hmm.
through their martyrdom. Conversion, right? We see this in the crucifixion. Christ is on the cross, right, and the centurion is there, and it says it in the Synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. But I like Matthew's version, right? When the centurion and those with him who were guarding Jesus saw the earthquake and these things happened, they feared greatly, saying, "Truly, this is the Son of God,"
Mm-hmm.
right? And so, in Orthodox tradition, that centurion goes on to be a saint of the church. If I
Wasn't he? I could be wrong. Wasn't it where it's like when he stabbed? He was the same person that stabbed Jesus with the spear,
I believe so.
and then
Yeah,
the blood and water flowed, and it hit his face,
yeah,
and the guy got his sight back, and he saw what he'd done.
yeah. Another reason God shouldn't stop a loving God shouldn't stop suffering. Right? We see salvation, we see conversion, we see the teaching or the advance of the gospel. Right? Other people and the grace of God. Other people can see um, the gospel in others through their suffering. They can see God's grace working in their suffering, right? In their demeanor, in how they act, how they live, how they pray in the midst of their suffering, right?
Mm-hmm.
And other people can see that and say, why do you have so much faith? Why aren't you more angry? Why aren't you? And that could lead to questions and education about the faith. Um, Another example is in the Old Testament is Joseph, right?
Mm-hmm.
His brothers uh, betrayed him, sold him. He lived a life of slavery for a while, and then eventually, what happens? He becomes a governor in Egypt, right? His suffering took him from a bad place, but eventually led to good.
What we say that suffering is that, wouldn't that be suffering from sin, not spiritual suffering?
in Joseph's.
Yes.
But then think about so
But God made that suffering, he fulfilled it to the, I don't know how to word it properly.
I mean the
'Cause,
end result was he led him to something greater, right?
mhm,
God led him to something greater. So um, it was suffering from sin because maybe because his brothers
mhm,
sold him into sin,
yeah,
into that slavery. But if you think about it from a personal perspective, right?
mhm.
Like, how would you feel about your brothers selling selling you, well, leaving you to die, and then
Yeah.
selling you, to slavery, and now you're a slave for like such a long time of your life,
Mhm.
right? So from a personal perspective, like it's suffering, right? Because you
Yeah.
went from a beautiful family to
Mhm.
slavery and now serving like Pharaoh, right?
Yeah.
But eventually he worked. God allowed that to lead him to something greater,
Mhm.
which is um, being governor, right? And we know how that story ends when his family comes back. So there is suffering that can lead to something greater, right? Something good, um, and ultimately suffering draws us back into communion with God if we allow it,
Mhm.
right? Again, that's why I go back to rather than why, how? How can this suffering? How can I endure it and get back to a or strengthen my relationship with God?
Mhm.
There's a um, there's a quote from Saint Jerome on the passage of the story of the book of Job. It's a little long, but I'm going to read it. When Job lost all his wealth, when he lost his sons, everything seemed to go against him. But since he loved the Lord, the evils that befell him worked together for his good. The vermin of his body were preparing for him the crown of heaven. Before the time he is tempted, God has never spoken to him. After he is tempted, however, God comes to him and speaks familiarly with him, as a friend with his friend. And this is the most beautiful part. Let calamity strike. Let every kind of disaster fall, as long as after the catastrophe, Christ comes. Let calamity strike. Let every kind of disaster fall, as long as after the catastrophe, Christ comes. And I think that's the biggest difference as Orthodox Christians in suffering,
Mhm.
right? Should God stop it? No, because it brings us closer to God and because He's there, right?
Mhm.
After that suffering, during that suffering, before that suffering, God is there. So Saint Jerome is saying everything that Job went through, right? Eventually, it leads him to a familiar friend to friend conversation with God. So let all those things happen, right? Afterwards, is God there for us to also have that conversation, that prayer with Him?
Mhm. So then I'm thinking of a certain example, and in the example of church hurt,
Hmm.
we see that people have left the church due to church hurt. We've also seen many divisions in the church, whether it be in like a general body meeting, whether it be in the actual historical timeline of Christianity.
Yeah,
We've seen so many divisions,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so, why would he allow that type of suffering to occur where it's his children all splitting and departing from him
Um,
and from the church as well?
and from the church, yeah. I mean, I could say, we could say a lot of things could pull us from God, right? Not just suffering, right?
Hmm.
People in their actions could pull us from God, right? Um, other religions could pull us from God. Science, right? For those people that insist on a distinction between religion and science, right? They that could separate us from God, right? So then, to kind of counter, like, why would He allow those?
Hmm.
Should He remove those, right? And
But
obviously the answer,
oh, go ahead, go ahead.
no, obviously the answer is no. But
Hmm.
I think it goes back to free will, right? And
Hmm.
what comes out of these sufferings. Um, God won't force His love, right?
Hmm.
He won't force it on anyone. He allows people to choose. Now, there is a clear distinction between life with Him and without Him,
Hmm.
right? And we see that in Scripture and in the traditions and the teachings of the church. But suffering isn't just about um, leaving the church or leaving God, right? It
Hmm.
results in that. But again, if we kind of reframe it from allowing it to hurt us to allowing us to grow, it can change, right? We see this in the Gospel of John, chapter 9, when Jesus heals a blind man, right? The disciples ask him, who sinned, this person or this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Christ says, neither. Neither this man or his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him. So suffering can cause people to leave, but so can many other things. But suffering can cause people to join or to come to God, and so could many other things, right? So an example I like to, always stands out to me, my own experience, is when I was working as a nurse, right? In a hospital, right? You see so many sick people. You see people that are with cancer. I've had patients that had cancer. I've had patients that have different surgeries. I have had patients that were just living a normal life. They were running and they got hurt, right? So there's so many different reasons that they're in the hospital. But what always stood out to me was those patients that when they were sick, when they were, they had cancer or they had surgeries or whatever, they're struggling to eat or get out of bed or whatever, their faith was always strong. And I would say their faith, in my experience, got stronger. Right? The moment they were hit with affliction, their faith got stronger. I really think there's something about our backs being against the wall that we really don't have it. It's one way or the other. Either we're lucky enough at this moment to not know what it means like to not make it to tomorrow, right? A lot of people, when they get to that point of I don't know how much time I have, their life changes or their mindset changes, and their relationship with God can strengthen. And I've seen that, right? I've seen people with cancer strengthen their relationship with God because they know they don't know what's coming next, and they can't control what's coming next. So all they can do is leave that stress and anxiety and fear at the feet of God and trust in Him, right? So suffering, again, if He were to stop it, right? I also wouldn't guarantee. I wouldn't say it guarantees people not leaving. We're human. We're prideful, right? We have so much. We can be so very prideful. If suffering wasn't keeping us from God, something else would. Something else would, right? If no one, because there's people that haven't really experienced anything. Again, it's subjective, right? Suffering is subjective. But there's people that probably haven't experienced much, but they'll still have their own issues wrestling with God, right? So if suffering doesn't keep us from God, sorry, if suffering doesn't keep us from God, something else would. We'd find something.
But wouldn't, again, going back to this previous question, wouldn't a loving God, if He sees His flock fighting amongst each other, and He sees that someone's about to leave, wouldn't God intervene to let the person allow the person to come back,
Um,
or at least make sure the person doesn't leave?
yeah. So yes and no. So intervene, yeah. I can see God doing that, right? Not forcing, right? Intervening, and this is what's always so interesting. Can the person leaving see the intervention? Right? Unless God comes, I believe we're so prideful, or we can be so
We
prideful.
have a tunnel vision.
We have tunnel vision. Like even if God were to come down Himself and say all these things, right?
Yeah.
We'll still be like,
I don't know.
I don't know, right? Like so I do think God does. He could, right? But do we see it? Do we recognize it? Right? When I know I've known people that right in the middle of the night, right, calling to God, I'm lost, help me, right? If we're truly believing and asking for His help, we have to believe like it may or may not be like that, right? We believe that, or we have to believe that I asked for this. I'm up at, I don't know, 1, 2 a.m. I'm crying. I'm lost. I'm scared. I'm hurting. I need your help, Lord. And we have to trust that He hears us and that He's going to get this done. We just got to trust His time, right? And not only that, we got to change our ways, right? People that complain, I don't want to say complain. People that are suffering or going through things and they call on God, right? Good, you called on God. God will work. Now do your part. Now go pray. Go to church, right? Go talk to your spiritual father. Go talk to your, I don't know, spouse or your friends. Get your help, get your guidance, do what you can.
Yeah.
God will take care of the rest.
So then how do we build trust in times of suffering? Or how do we focus on it more? Because in times of suffering, it kind of seems way harder to do it
Yeah.
and not focus on suffering. So how do we trust in God more?
We have to go through the, we have to, I don't want to say go through the motions, but we have to persevere. We have to persevere. Um, it's easy for us as human beings to be influenced by the devil and the demons, especially in moments of suffering. And so we're going through something where we ask these questions of why, how come me, why this, right? And we just hear these thoughts and these voices saying, God doesn't love you, or God has abandoned you, or it's because you are a horrible person. These things are there, right? And when we listen to those things, when we hear those things, it's the devil and the demons trying to pull us away from God, right? The temptations to not trust in Him are there, right? With the devil, with the demons whispering in our ear, with our thoughts. But we truly have to double down, right? And I know it's like a generic answer. No one's going to like this, but we don't like. There's no easy way to say it, right? We're going through something, we call on God, and we then go pray, go to church, change our habits, change whatever it is that we can change, that we can control, and just trust that God is working through those things, right? We talk about synergy, which is working with God, right? Cooperation with God's will. We have to trust that when we are going through something, even if it doesn't make any sense at all, like Job's situation, that God is working in some way, right? And we don't necessarily have to see the end goal right then and there. We don't have to see, well, God is testing you for this, or He's punishing you for this, or He's correcting you for this. Because again, that why doesn't matter. It's just going to get us into a loop, a rabbit hole even further, right? I don't want to say it doesn't matter because it's a valid question, but I feel like it'll just send us into a loop, a rabbit hole even further, right? So if
We just start spiraling
you just start
down.
spiraling, right? So if you trust, if we want to trust in God, we just keep going with the things the church recommends. And then if you talk to a spiritual father, I'm sure because everything's case by case, there'll be more that we can do. But we have to keep doing it, right? I know a lot of people that struggle with stuff, and they say, I prayed to God about it, and I'm still going through it. Well, when did you, I'm talking to them on a Wednesday. When did you pray to God? Last week. What about today? No. What about yesterday? No. What about the day before? No, I'm busy.
Yeah.
Right, so do we actually change, right? And that might be the whole point. Right? That might be the whole point. Did we actually grow, right? Did we change our perspective from why is this happening to, okay, it's happening. How can I trust? How can I endure? And I really think the life of the church, as well as our spiritual life, if we take it truly seriously, like studying for an exam that we have in a week, right? When that procrastination hits, right? Like that after the moment of procrastination, you have no choice but to lock in, right? If we want to get through that, we should lock in, right? For lack of a better term.
I like locking.
But truly, do we know what that means, right? Do we actually do that?
So then are we supposed to rejoice in our suffering and other people's suffering?
Um, to a degree, I would say yes, right? Not necessarily in the situation or like the pain, right?
But like the results?
But like the not the result, because in the moment we don't know the result, right?
Yeah.
But in knowing that God is there, in what God does through it, right? 2 Corinthians 12, right? Verses 9 to 10. This is Saint Paul, and he said to me, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in needs, in persecutions, in distresses for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Right? So we're talking about rejoicing in our suffering. Here, St. Paul is showing us, and God is saying, right, my strength is made perfect in weakness. St. Paul is rejoicing, he's boasting that the power of Christ may rest upon him. So when we say, should we rejoice in each other's suffering, not necessarily the situation, right? Like I wouldn't go up to someone and say like rejoice that you have cancer, or like rejoice that
Yeah.
you, because that's just that's
Kind of
not.
messed up.
I mean, it's not the right way to word that, right? But rejoice in knowing that whatever it is, God is there. Whatever it is, God is making you stronger in it, and the power of God is there,
Mhm.
right? And that's something that's invaluable to us as Christians. The power of God being there. The joy that we're talking about doesn't come from the pain. It comes from the hope. It comes from hope. The hope that God is guiding us through this. That God is there for us. Um, Matthew, the Beatitudes, right? Matthew 5. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake,
Mhm.
for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, right? In our church, right, the hope of Christ, um, uh, joy, sorrow, they don't necessarily um, separate, right? They can
Yeah.
coexist,
Mhm.
right? Because we see this in the life of Christ in His crucifixion,
Mhm.
right? And that's why we see um, in the hope of the resurrection when someone passes, right? Because Christ, of course, the resurrection was sorrowful. Sorry, the crucifixion
Yeah.
and that passion was sorrowful.
Mhm.
But the end result of the resurrection is joy, right? So
Mhm.
joy and sorrow can coexist. We can be experiencing suffering,
Yeah.
but we know that ultimately in that suffering, although it's hard to see and is a lot small, that joy and that hope is there only because Christ is there. But again, we have to be open to it, right? God will intervene in His way, but we have to be open to it.
So, could you tell us a little bit more about the implication of Christ's sufferings for man's suffering?
Everything,
Everything?
everything, in my opinion. Christ's implication, His suffering for our suffering is everything. There's
Mhm.
a there's a book, and I'm not sponsored to say this, but it's called "Gratitude in Life's Trenches," written by Robin Phillips. We got it during seminary,
Mhm.
and there's a quote in here by a Father George that I'd like to read. It's very powerful. Christ did not come into the world to eliminate suffering. Christ did not even come into the world to explain it. He came to fill human suffering with His presence. That is why where suffering is great, there God is. There Christ is in us.
Mhm.
If you want to feel the presence of God, go into hospitals. There you will see suffering of innocent children, the suffering of old people. The presence of God, the presence of Jesus Christ is in all their suffering. When Christ came into the world and suffered, He suffered with me, He suffered with you. Can you imagine how much dignity He gave to human suffering? To suffer with us, to fill our suffering with His presence. Sorry. Christ's crucifixion in his suffering is everything for us. Is everything for us. Uh, we have to reframe our suffering from why to how. Knowing that God is there, knowing that um, we can endure that suffering with Him being there, is such a powerful thing for us. Because we as human beings, regardless of what we're going through, right, regardless of what we're experiencing, to ever believe, even for a second, that God is not there, that God is not present, that God is not with us in that suffering, is we don't deserve that, right? We don't deserve that. That's purely the devil and the demons pulling us away from God into that suffering and into that hurt. And that's not something God wants for us, because we see in the garden, right, in Genesis, um, God made human beings to be in communion with Him. And He's just trying to get us back to that communion, if we wish.
Mhm.
And anything else that pulls us from Him, that convinces us that we don't, He's not there, is the devil, is the demons,
Mhm.
is them winning, right? Um, I truly believe, um, right, we're all given a cross to bear. But I think we need to figure out again how to change that cross. We carry that cross, not change the cross. We carry that cross, but how to make that cross a ministry, right? If we think about someone with cancer, what they experience, what they go through, they may be experiencing it, they may be going through it, um, and if they go through it with God, once they get to a good headspace, then they can help other people with cancer because they've been there, right? They take that cross and they turn it into a ministry, right? People who have lost someone, right? They can take their loss, right? Once they get over it, or through it, and they process it, right? They can take their loss and they can turn it into a ministry by being there for other people that have lost someone or when they lose someone, right? Um, People that have lost a child, it's a horrible thing, a difficult thing, right? Um, but if at all, right? I don't want to say once because it's not always easy, whether you have cancer, whether you lose someone, whether you lose a child. But when you experience that, if we can endure it with God, knowing He's there, when someone else experiences this, we now become that reflection of Christ to those people, right? Whether it's cancer, whether it's losing a loved one, whether it's losing an infant, whether it's anything else, when we experience that, we can take that cross, carry it, and transform it into a ministry, reflecting Christ's love through us. But we have to be able to endure it first. And so his suffering, right? Christ's suffering and his crucifixion, and his passion, his resurrection made the way for so many of the things that we saw in the lives of the saints and the apostles and the disciples, and the beauty that came from it, right? And their ministry, what it meant for their ministries, what they're now able to do it and have done in the name of Christ. And we are no different, right? We take our suffering, we take whatever it is we're experiencing, we take our cross, we bear it with God, right? With God in the midst of it, and we turn that cross into a ministry, right? We turn that cross into something that can help people in their moments of suffering. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So then could you tell us a little bit more about how you have personally overcome suffering?
Yeah. I don't know if I would say I have fully overcome certain things, but
Or handle or
yeah, handled. So what I do first and foremost is I try to have a consistent prayer life. I try to do consistent prayer, um, at least in the morning and in the evening, and in the middle of the day if I can. I try to have a consistent prayer life, and especially when I'm feeling anxious or scared or nervous or uncertain, I do the Jesus prayer, right? Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, and I just repeat that over and over again. Sometimes when I'm driving, sometimes when I'm at home or working, I just try to say that over and over again. All right, I try to keep myself to the hours of prayer. Right? We have the common prayers, the Shema. I try to keep myself to those as much as possible because having that consistent prayer for a moment, maybe this is just me, but for a moment when I pray, it's just like there's nothing else it helps me kind of calm down the thoughts and the stress, right? Um, there's still like distractions because our mind goes everywhere. But when I'm able to like sit there and actually pray and focus, it helps me because it puts everything else to the side, even for like that 20, 30 minutes, right? Another thing I do is I come to church. I know that's cliche, but I come to church. I don't know if you've heard this. Um, there's athletes, specifically basketball players, that have said, um, or they'll say when they get onto the court, it's like everything kind of disappears for a moment, right? Like they're just kind of
it's just them.
it's just them in the court,
Yeah.
right? Even if they're playing 5-on-5, like everything they're just focused on the game. All the stresses of the world they melt away for like however long you play, right? For like 2 hours, right? I grew up playing basketball, so that's the same effect. But what I noticed was when I walk into the church, I have that effect. Like that happens to me as well. Like even just walking into this church or any church, it's like a deep breath for me, and I don't want to say like I feel at home or I feel comfortable, right? And I just being here, even if I couldn't focus fully on the liturgy, right? Especially when I'm of course when I'm not celebrating, but even when if I couldn't focus on the liturgy, if I'm just standing, just being here, like does so much mentally for me, right? And saying the Jesus prayer in the church, being in this air with the incense, with the choir, with everything, right? Being in this presence, and even if it was quiet and the lights were off, just being here is a calming thing for me. So I come to church. I make myself come to church even if I don't want to. Obviously, before priesthood,
Yeah.
because I want to. But even if I'm struggling, right, I make myself come to church because I struggle too. I do confession regularly, or I try to do confession regularly, uh, and properly prepare for Kurbana, for the Eucharist. So I make that a part of my, especially when I'm struggling, right? Because all my thoughts are everywhere. Um, and I get spiritual guidance from my spiritual father. I think that's what helps. Probably one of the most. I talk to him a lot, and it gets to a point where I kind of feel bad because I call him so much. I don't ask how he's doing. I just say, "Hey, I'm going through this. What can you help me, or like, what can I do?" Right. So that spiritual guidance is invaluable, right? Having that relationship with the spiritual father in those moments of suffering. And I don't think our people do that, right? I don't think our people do that. They experience what they experience alone. If they have marital issues, they experience it alone. If they are sick, right, they may tell the priest, but then that's where they leave it. Like for some reason, when we get sick as an Indian community, we just keep it under wraps, which I get to mind your business, like be private, but at least let me know so I can pray for you. Yeah, absolutely.
Any questions before I end?
Cameraman in the cut. But when you said call on God in times of suffering, does that mean you ask God to alleviate your suffering, or does that mean you just stay consistent with your normal prayer life, like your liturgical prayer life, and just sit with Him and meditate with Him? Or does that, like mentioned before, does it mean tell God to get rid of this suffering?
I think it could mean all of the above, right? I I don't think it's wrong, right? Absolutely not, to say, take this away from me, right? I don't know who to look at, the cameraman or I don't think it's wrong to say, take this away from me, right? That's completely normal. But if it doesn't happen in my time, the time I have it envisioned, so if I say, Lord, take this away from me, if it doesn't happen instantly or in a month or in 6 months or in a year, that may be the only difficulty with that, right? But absolutely, like we can pray, take it from me. But that prayer life, that calling on God is also the prayers of or the life of the church. So if when you say liturgical prayers, if you're talking about like just the things we do at church, yeah, come, please come, right? Come to church, participate in it. Even if you're hurting, come, just be in the presence. I have people that tell me sometimes, or say like, hey, they struggle to focus in church, right? So what do I do? I still like I don't want to come because I can't focus. No, don't come. Like don't not come. Still come. Even if you can only focus for like 2 minutes, right? That's 2 more minutes than you had before. Just focus. So even if you're hurting, even if you're struggling, just come. Just come be in the presence. Come, stand here, and maybe just say the Jesus prayer internally, right? But don't let suffering stop you, right? Being in that liturgical life, in a personal prayer life sense, if you're able to do all of Shema, great. If you're not, I would just say like just try to pray morning and evening, right? The it's case by case, but the difference is there's no, or I guess the distinction is there's no set way, right? But in that prayer, nothing wrong with asking God, take this away from me, alleviate this, help me, right? But we have to trust that He's working it in His own time. That it won't happen. That even if it doesn't happen immediately, or even within whatever time frame we have, let's say I'm gonna give it a year. Don't do that. Just pray and work through it, and it'll resolve itself, or not resolve itself. God will resolve it. He'll work through it. We'll see what's supposed to happen, right? but that if we just sit there and wallow in the suffering, it just hardens our heart. We ask God why, perfectly normal. We struggle with it. We have difficulties with whatever it is, perfectly normal, right? But the moment we say, I'm going to pull away from God, or I'm going to stop going to church, or I'm going to stop praying, I'm going to stop being in this life, then that's what the devil wants. And then the suffering will eventually, I don't want to say go away, but it'll go where it goes, right? But as long as we turn away from God, the devil wins, right? So the reason I say to call on God is because that's what our goal should be. Eventually, we may or may not, right, see the result of the suffering. But if we can stick with God in that, if we can continually lean on God and pray on God, and whether that's liturgically or whether that's individually, but push ourselves more than in prayer in a way that we haven't before, then that suffering may not even get easier, right? But God is there. That's what that's about. God's presence.
I think it was I want to say it was Father Josiah.
Mhm.
He was saying that if they're suffering, pray 3 times, and if it's not answered, then it says, "Lord, thank you for the suffering."
Oh, I
Right.
haven't seen that one.
I
Father Josiah Trenum?
yes.
I have a quote here I was supposed to read from him. He said something very, I thought it was applicable. It was nice. He said, "Nothing happens to God's children that is not in His own providence designed for their eternal glory."
Mm-hmm.
Nothing happens to God's children that is not in God's own providence or His own providence designed for their eternal glory. So whatever that we are going through, right, it's designed for us, for our glory, eternal glory, right? Again, this world is passing, it's
Yeah.
fleeting, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we get stuck on everything we're going through here. If we get cancer, it's the end of the world, right? Why did this happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we get stuck on that, right? If we are if we lose someone, we get stuck. Why did God take them away, right? I know I'm not saying all this is easy at all, right? It's all difficult, but we get caught up on those things, and um, we don't see the bigger picture in terms of what this means from an eternal standpoint. Because it's hard. We don't. God isn't going to come there and explain it. That's why for me I have that trust and that hope that God will, like, it's designed for something greater. If not for me or my family, for someone at some point. And then I'll endure it, trust in Him, and that's all I can really do.
So then, our last and final question:
Mhm.
when we see members of our church struggling or going through suffering, what is the church's role in that moment?
That reminds me about your church hurt question. I don't think I ever answered
Uh,
that. People experiencing church hurt, like we focus on God, right? Why is God allowing these things to happen? But I don't want to say blame the people, but why isn't the blame more on how we treat each other, right? Not anyone specific, but more on how we treat each other, right? Again, we have free will. So my answer to that is, why would we treat each other that way? If we are feeling a certain way, right? How do we know that, whether knowingly or unknowingly, we're not doing that to someone else? Or if someone is treating us a certain way and we, in retaliation, do it to someone else, why are we continuing that trend, right? I think an interesting part um, of suffering is, obviously we know God allows it, but how come no one ever talks about the devil's role in it? We don't ever blame him. We don't ever question him. But there's a role that he plays in all this. But for some reason and maybe for good reason, because God is God, we only focus on his role. Right? Even in the story of Job, right? A lot of people read that story and say, God, like I said, God was testing him for fun. Right? No, the devil came to God and said, he only loves you because you blessed him, right? The devil's role was prominent in there. But when we retell that story, we only focus on God allowing that to happen, or God's testing, right? So church hurt is definitely a thing that we can overcome, but we just have to treat each other in a Christ-like way, right? So what is a church's role? I think it's to reflect Christ's love, to reflect the virtues of Christ: love, harmony, forgiveness, peace, humility, right? Humility is a big one. Reflect those virtues of Christ to each other in a true manner, right? I mean, we see pride in our church from the head all the way to the bottom, right? We see in the altar, and I'm not going to say, sorry, I'm not going to say like any priest, but I'll say myself, right? There's pride from me all the way to whoever, right? We see that, right? So if we can put on a little bit of humility, right? If we can put on these virtues of Christ, then that's just one step closer to lifting each other up in the church. Some practical things, right? Trying to bear someone else's burdens, help them, right? Help them with their burdens, whatever they're going through. Even if it's just talking to them, checking up on them, making food or something, right? Pray for them, right? Maybe they need material help, right? So not necessarily like financially, but like food or getting together different things, right? Be compassionate for them, right? To them, the hospital, the church is a hospital, right? It shouldn't be a place of judgment. And I think in our Indian community, this is like the pro and con of being in a big community, right? The con, I hear a lot of people say, you know, everyone's everywhere and they're in your business, things like that, right? But the pro is when something happens, we come together. We really do. When a funeral, for example, when that family is struggling with their loss, right? And they have to do a lot of things on their own for that family, figure out things at the cemetery and things like that. They have to make a lot of decisions, sign a lot of papers, things like that, which is hard to do after losing someone. But while they're doing that, the church community steps up, right? So getting things ready at church, organizing, you know, all the flowers that come, right? The Achen, organizing with the Achens, the priests, to get everything ready for the services, right? Anyone that comes into town, picking them up from the airport, right? During those few days, even days after, cooking food for that family because they're just not in the place to cook, right? And cooking food for them, helping them in that sense, coming to their house and praying, right? The community can do so much, and I say all this because I've seen this in our community, right? I've seen this happen, and it's a beautiful thing. And I don't think a lot of people have that community all the time. But if someone doesn't have that community, that should be the role or the place, one of the places of the church to step in and be that community for that person, whatever they're struggling with, right? We have, you know, so many things in our church, right? Addiction, different family problems, things like that, which we don't like to talk about, which we don't like to bring to light. But if we look at each other with humility and without judgment, we can really be helping people. We can really play a greater role in our church, right? Now, I'm not, you know, trying to say like get into other people's business, but when you know something, when something gets out there, hey, how can I help? Hey, I don't even know the details. How can I help? Right? They're gonna probably say, we're fine. Like, don't worry about it, right? And then if you have their number, praying for you. Can I help? Even if they don't respond, even if they don't say anything, even if they don't, you're right, if they say we're good, let them know you're there, right? So I think being a presence, reflecting Christ's love, reflecting his virtues in the church is a big way the church can support. The church can have a prominent role in suffering.
First and foremost, I'd like to thank you for coming on, sharing your time with us, talk about the role of suffering. And before we end, could you close us off with prayer?
Yes, let's pray. O Holy Father, guard us by your sacred name. O Son of God, our Savior, protect us with your victorious cross. O Holy Spirit, make us worthy temples of your holy habitation. O Lord our God, forever shelter us under your divine wings, at all times and forever. Amen.